Did you know that the gun industry in Montana in 2021 generated an estimated $21 million in federal business tax revenue? Multiple companies in the industry, including Line 49, have relocated to Montana in recent years due to the business-friendly environment. Attorney General Austin Knudsen has led a 27-state coalition asking the Supreme Court of the U.S. to overturn laws in California and Hawaii and to safeguard the Second Amendment. This points to a continued growth in the firearms industry in Montana. Discussing what's on the horizon and why Montana was ideal for relocation, please welcome Solicitor General Christian Corrigan from the Montana Attorney General's Office and Neil Weldon, General Manager of Line 49, to the stage.
Well, hi, everybody. I am Christian Corrigan. I'm Montana's Solicitor General. I have the privilege of working for Attorney General Austin Knudsen. And if you know anything about A.G. Knudsen, he is a firearms enthusiast and a stalwart defender of the Second Amendment, which makes my job a lot of fun. I get to work on any number of Second Amendment and firearms related issues, both here in Montana and across the country. In my capacity as our chief litigator and principal legal advisor. Prior to that, I served in the first Trump administration, and before that, I was a constitutional litigator at a firm some of you may know called Mountain States Legal Foundation, where I actually cut my teeth on Second Amendment litigation, suing the city of Boulder, Colorado over their so-called assault weapons ban back in 2018. But I am privileged to be with you here today and have a member of Montana's blossoming and thriving firearms industry to have a conversation about, as was introduced, about the business climate here for the firearms industry in Montana and what it might mean for the future. So I want to welcome Neil Weldon, the General Manager of Line 49 Rifle. Neil, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself to the folks and then we can kick off our conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. And before I start, I just want to say thanks to you for this opportunity, as well as the Chamber and all of you here, because I really like to tell this story. So you may see the enthusiasm coming through in my voice, and I won't apologize for it because it's a really cool story. I'm recently retired from the U.S. Air Force. I spent 25 years active duty, lots of operational experience, strategic experience, plans, a couple tours back in D.C. at the Pentagon. We have some overlap there with some of our background and experience there. And I'm really excited to be out here. And based on that experience is how I landed in this job, which we'll get into more in just a second. But that's me in a nutshell.
Well, over the last few years, really since 2021, under the leadership of the governor, the legislature, and the attorney general, Montana's really become a premier destination for the firearms industry. Why don't you tell us your story, your Montana story, and we'll kick it off that way and see where it goes from there.
Okay, thanks. So the story of Line 49 Rifle is very exciting, and I say that particularly from the perspective of being an American. So I am the token American. Everybody else, or a lot of the other people, are Canadian, and that's really where the story began. So up in Alberta, in Red Deer specifically, there is our parent or sister company. And the way they started was it was about 15 years ago. They had a small indoor shooting range, and that turned out to be pretty successful. And so they decided that they wanted to rent some firearms, and then it became more successful. And they said, well, maybe we should sell some firearms too. And then it became more successful. And then, as they were building their inventory for selling various different firearms for the shooting range specifically, the Canadian gun laws changed, and they changed rapidly and dramatically. And so the people up in Alberta said, geez, what do we do with this inventory? If all this stuff is legal today, but tomorrow it's potentially illegal, that's problematic. So what they decided to do as good entrepreneurs, they bought some lathes and they got some machinists, and they added on a machine shop, and they went back and they figured out exactly what the law said was legal and illegal. They looked at their inventory and they said, okay, so if we change this part and this part and this piece and that, is it legal? And the Canadian federal government said, well, technically, yes. They said, okay, got it, that's what we're doing. So they started doing that, and their business exploded from that. And then from there, then they began manufacturing their own firearms in-house. Well, the Canadian gun laws continued to change, and it became harder and harder and harder for them to keep up. So what they said was, geez, what do we do? And of course, they looked south and they said, well, we probably need to go to the United States, where we have the protection of the US Constitution and the Second Amendment specifically, where we have the stability to know how to operate and the freedom to operate. And so they came south, and a lot of people want to know, where does the name Line 49 come from? Well, the 49th parallel is what separates the US and Canada. So they crossed the Rubicon heading south across the Line 49 into Montana, and basically we're setting up shop and trying to get after it again.
Well, that's excellent. So if I understand it, as the U.S. Supreme Court has become more originalist and more protective of gun rights under the Second Amendment, Canada seems to have gone the other way. Is that right? So tell us a little bit about the products that you all make, what they mean to you, where you sell them, and what the business environment is like here in Montana.
Okay. I like that last question in particular, as well as the first question, because I like to brag about our things. But what we're starting with is a line of what we call the super short action precision match grade rifles. It's built around small cartridges like the 223 Remington or the Hornady ARC cartridge family, and it's a bolt action rifle, and it's a short bolt throw, and they're precision guns. So we're primarily focusing on that market to begin with. We expect probably, depending on where the market takes us and when we achieve different levels of success, to build additional lines, perhaps some more traditional hunting lines and things like that. But that's where we are right now. And we have a few other things where we're modifying some lever action guns, some 4570s, really kind of tricking them out with some of our friends and partners in the firearms industry. Ranger Point Precision is one. And that's kind of really where we're focusing right now. Your second question, why Montana? So it's a two-part question, or a two-part answer. The first part is, honestly, it's proximity, right? So Alberta's close to Montana. And that was beneficial because there's a lot of overlap and a collaboration that occurs between the shop in Kalispell and then the shop in Red Deer. The second reason, which I think is exciting, is the culture, right? So the culture that exists in Montana is, for the gun industry in particular, is phenomenal. Every time somebody says, what is it that you do? And I say, what I do, I mean, you should see their eyes just get big and broad. Just, wow. Can I come see? Sure, come see. What are you doing? And come and take a look and see what we're doing. The culture in terms of both being business friendly as well as being gun friendly is the number one reason, right? So if you look at companies like Smith & Wesson, who was in Massachusetts and left to go to Tennessee, you got Ruger, who's shifting operations to Arizona and other places. That doesn't happen here, right? Because it's very friendly. And then from a business perspective, we've all talked a lot about this. I have been absolutely flabbergasted by the level of support that Line 49 rifle has received from the Chamber of Commerce, from the Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, Senator Sheehy's office. They were instrumental because we got stuck, sadly, with our federal firearms license with the government shutdown. So the ATF went home and everybody else went home. So we were stuck saying, uh-oh, now what? So Senator Sheehy's office, and then of course, the governor's office as well. I mean, everybody has just been shockingly supportive. The fact that we were able to get a state-backed loan through First Interstate, I mean, it really blew our socks off. The level of cooperation and enthusiasm for us to hit the ground running has been wonderful.
Well, that's excellent to see, because I know there are a number of states out there that are going the other direction. So am I right that you've got customers all over the country? Maybe not in California and some of the bluer states, but do you sell products to folks across the country?
Well, we certainly will. So our website just went live, and part of that was we were trying not to speed ahead of that federal firearms license, right? So we actually just got that on New Year's Eve, and we were very, very excited about that. We didn't expect to get it before 2026, but we got that, and we of course can't build firearms, and we can't sell firearms without the firearms license. So, but now that we've got that, operations are up, website's up, and so we will sell to all 50 states, to include California. We just have to make sure that we and the customers are in compliance, but yeah.
In compliance with the various Byzantine firearms regulation regimes. Well, looking ahead, so first of all, best of luck. This is an incredible opportunity for your company, and it sounds like you've got nothing but potential ahead of you. Looking ahead to, because we can always get better, looking ahead to the 2027 legislative session and beyond, do you have any ideas on what can be done to make Montana an even better business climate for the firearms industry, or anything we should keep doing, or is it just keep on going in the same direction?
I honestly think the level of support is I don't know how rare that is, right? Because I haven't done this before in the other 49 states. I can't imagine that this is universal, though. So I think highlighting the welcoming attitude, the support is definitely one thing. Some of the challenges that we face, and I've heard it a few other times up here on the stage, of course, cost of living is high. Talent acquisition for some of the more specialized skills is a bit challenging. There's not a huge pool to choose from. And supply and logistics is a little bit harder. It sometimes feels like we're at the edge of empire, I guess, because we are. And we're the last people to get things from UPS or FedEx, and it takes a minute. But all those things are certainly not insurmountable. So I think that if there's things that can be done, like again, it's not just me saying it seems to be a common theme of concerns that are being discussed on the stage. Those things I feel like will get worked out. I think that really one of the best things that could be done is just continue to promote the support that's available.
It's always amazing to me that it took a company, say like Smith & Wesson, that long to leave Massachusetts. It's not like they just decided that they were an anti-gun state, right? But I think it's great for folks to know that Montana is open for business, and especially if you're a firearms manufacturer, that this is where you need to be, and that they've got the support of all levels of government here. Do you want to move on and talk about are there any, say, federal regulatory challenges, anything that you guys look at that are concerning to you? Obviously, we have a more friendly administration in Washington. It sounds like Senator Sheehy's office helped with a gap in paperwork. But any like large level, high level things in terms of the federal regulatory apparatus that are concerning, or do you think things are sort of heading in the right direction?
Heading in the right direction. Of course, the federal government feels a bit like a roller coaster on occasion. I think we are somewhat insulated because of our size, and we're not making the traditional scary guns, right? We're not building guns that are, we're not building AR-15s, we're not mass producing, and we will sell some AR-15 barrels, but we're building bolt-action precision rifles, hunting rifles, things like that. So I feel that that uncertainty exists. However, I want to go back to one of the points I made previously, which is particularly when I talk to my Canadian counterparts, they are more patriotic and more appreciative for the Second Amendment than most Americans that I talk to. And that gives me a lot of confidence as well, because they see the other side, right? And if they go, that's how bad it could be, this is where we are now, and there's a reason that we chose to come down in the US and do our production here. So I feel that there's always going to be those political hot topics, but we're all things considered on the when you factor in what it could be across the globe, we're pretty happy here in Montana.
Yeah, I think that's an important perspective. I spend a lot of time, as does A.G. Knudsen, with the Second Amendment community, and folks may know the Vanderstock case at the Supreme Court, the so-called ghost guns case, and for every loss we have, there are a lot of wins, and sometimes it just takes looking over on the other side of the fence to realize how lucky we are that we have a court that has recognized our Second Amendment rights to the point it already has. And of course, we can always get better, and of course, we need to keep pushing. But I think there's always an opportunity for gratitude. One, that we live in Montana and not California, but also that we live in the United States and have a Second Amendment, unlike a lot of other countries.
Do you mind if I flip the script a little bit and ask you a question, which is, what are, as I mentioned earlier, it's overwhelming, the level of support and the firearms culture, both from the legislative standpoint as well as just the everyday, person walking on the street. What does that look like from your perspective? What concerns would you have, and what fight have you and perhaps the AG's office had to take to make us, or to make it so that we can operate in this condition?
Yeah, I think everyone knows, we file a lot of briefs on challenges to, say, wacky laws in California and Hawaii, and everyone knows about those fights. They're very public. I think the biggest concern that we have are what I would consider sort of collateral attacks on the firearms industry. To give a couple examples, debanking is a problem. Where financial institutions will sort of secretly tell the firearms industry, well, you're no longer welcome to do business here. Again, as a banking customer, I would like to know if my financial institution doesn't want to host the firearms industry, because I would just take my business somewhere else, right? I also think, I'll give an example. A couple years ago, Elizabeth Warren and some of her friends in the Senate sent a nastygram on Senate letterhead to the major shipping companies because they didn't like the fact that FFLs were shipping firearms across state lines, and they actually had to change their terms to make them more onerous on FFLs. Just kind of overnight did this, and we were alerted to that. And we reached out to the companies and actually worked out an agreement to say, hey, we're not trying to downplay the concerns that you might have, and obviously these are unique types of packages that you ship, but simply responding to Elizabeth Warren and putting these onerous requirements on FFLs because guns sound scary isn't the way to do things. And we were able to quietly behind the scenes work out an agreement to help out several FFLs here in Montana. The other thing I'll point out are lawsuits against firearms manufacturers. So there was a case that went to the Supreme Court last year. The government of Mexico actually sued the 7 largest firearms manufacturers for cartel violence and deaths in Mexico. Now, fortunately, back in 2005, back when Congress passed laws, they passed a law called the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Firearms Act that prohibited liability lawsuits against firearms manufacturers if they were used by criminals downstream, as long as the companies didn't break the law in their marketing and they weren't the proximate cause of the actual violence. Well, the very, very left-wing First Circuit Court of Appeals found a way to torture that statute and say, yes, Mexico's lawsuit could proceed against those firearms companies, which would have been an absolute windfall for the anti-gun brigade, right? It went to the US Supreme Court, and we got a unanimous decision saying that the lawsuit was barred. Even the liberal justices agreed. Montana was proud to lead a 28-state coalition saying that the Supreme Court should reject the lawsuit. The last thing I will say related to another Supreme Court case are rogue regulators. So there was a case 2 years ago called National Rifle Association v. Volo, and New York's financial regulator actually went to several insurance companies behind the scenes and said, I don't want you to do business with the NRA, and if you do, you're going to come under increased regulatory scrutiny. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals said, well, there wasn't really a direct threat. We're going to let you use that mafioso, sure would be a shame if something happened to your business. The US Supreme Court took the case, and another unanimous decision, even with the liberal justices saying that is a First Amendment violation. You cannot go to companies and threaten regulatory scrutiny to try to ice out a particular industry. Those are great decisions, but we are always having to be aware of those types of things happening to the firearms industry, to the firearms community. And I think that's where attorneys general here in Montana, obviously, I'm biased, but I think Attorney General Knudsen, has been the leader. But we've been able to band together when we've seen a lot of these actions and push back, not just from one attorney general, but from 20 plus. And I think it's meant a lot to the pro Second Amendment movement.
Well, I know I certainly appreciate it. That's the stability that honestly we need, right? We can't operate if there's uncertainty because there's nowhere else to go, right? We don't have another United States further south of us that we can continue to move south for, but yeah, that's good.
Great. I think I would just highlight in terms of regulatory, I think I mentioned the federal regulatory apparatus. We are very fortunate to have an administration in Washington that values the Second Amendment. We've seen a number of the Biden era rules, the pistol brace rule, the FFL dealer rule, were enjoined by federal courts, and so the Trump administration didn't have to repeal that. But by and large, they are working to get rid of a lot of the regulatory burden. And what I can say is one of the things we're doing, we're having conversations, if not weekly, at least monthly, of where the administration can take steps forward on cases that we care about, on issues that we care about, and issues that are important to our Second Amendment community. But I will say I've been very impressed at how seriously they've taken the Second Amendment concerns, and even the briefs that they filed in cases along with us have been fairly impressive. So I think there's never been a better time to be a Second Amendment supporter, never been a better place to have a firearms business than Montana, and I think we're really set up for success.
Thank you.
Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes. We were a little... Yeah, do we want to take any questions?
Yes, I have to.
Raise your hand. All right.
So I hail from Kalispell. I work at Flathead Electric Co-op just down the road from where you guys are set up. So welcome to Kalispell. And my question is, you talked about how there's, you still have a presence in Alberta. What are kind of your goals for the Kalispell facility? How many people do you foresee employing? Are you going to expand? What does that look like?
Yeah, we're going to have to. And I'll tell you right now, there's 4 people working full time. And to say that they are multitasking is an understatement. So yes, we need to grow. How much? Sort of like we don't want to get too far ahead of our skis with having too many products. We don't want to hire too many people too fast. But what is encouraging is, and again, leveraging the relationships that they have already established in Canada at Red Deer. The demand for what we're doing internal to the United States has been strong. So we know we're going to have to ramp up operations quickly, and I'm sure that our current employees will be grateful. Okay.
All right, well, thank you for indulging us late in the afternoon, and look forward to seeing all the great products that Line 49 is going to put out.
Thank you very much, Christian.
Well, thank you, Christian and Neil, for taking some time to talk to us about the industry. It's just another great example of partnerships between business and government to try to drive business in Montana.